The whole world is in debt. Every country in the world is in debt. America's debt has surpassed $37 trillion. Yes, trillion. Europe owes about 15 trillion. Japan nearly 13 trillion. Even oil-rich Saudi Arabia, export giant Germany, and powerhouse China are all in debt. But here's the first question that comes to mind. If everyone is in debt, who is all this money owed to? In other words, who's on the other side of the deal? Debt isn't just a burden. It's the system itself. Debt isn't merely a weight on our shoulders. It's the foundation of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every period of growth or collapse, they all revolve around this invisible web of debt. Today, the world's total debt is estimated at around $315 trillion. That's nearly 3 times the size of the global economy. So how did we end up here? Let's go back to the beginning. The birth of national debt. In 1694, England was at war with France, but the royal treasury was empty. No gold, no funds. The king turned to wealthy merchants with a proposal. Lend me money and I'll pay you back with future tax revenues, with interest. That decision led to the creation of the Bank of England. For the first time, a government gained the ability to spend money it didn't yet have. In return, the merchants received official government guarantees, bonds. This moment is considered the birth of the modern financial system. Other nations soon followed: France, the Netherlands, and later the United States. Borrowing was no longer a sign of weakness. It became a symbol of power. The more credible your finances, the easier it was to borrow. In the past, empires conquered land to gain gold. Today, nations issue bonds to gain interest. The battlefield is no longer drawn with swords. It's drawn with balance sheets. Who owes whom today? Fast forward to today, and the picture is astonishing. America's total debt stands at $37 trillion. The interesting part? Most of that debt is actually owed within the U.S. itself. The U.S. Treasury issues bonds, which are bought by American banks, pension funds, and investors. Sometimes the Federal Reserve steps in to buy those bonds back, printing new dollars in return. In other words, the system has become a mechanism that lends money to itself. Foreign debt accounts for only about 1/3 of the total, and most of that is held by Japan, China, and the United Kingdom. So while America owes China is technically true, it's heavily exaggerated. China holds less than 2% of U.S. debt. In short, the system largely finances itself. Everyone is everyone's creditor. This isn't just an American story. Japan lends to the U.S. lends to Europe. Europe lends to developing nations. And those nations invest their reserves right back into Western bonds. In essence, we all hold each other's debt. The global economy operates like a massive chain of IOUs, a giant table of interlinked promises. As long as no one leaves the game, the system keeps spinning. Who really holds the power? Behind this cycle lies an unseen force: the markets. Hedge funds, banks, pension funds, and central banks. They decide who can borrow cheaply and who must pay dearly. When confidence in a country fades, interest rates soar, currencies fall, and governments crumble. Democracy may decide who governs, but the markets decide who survives. And at the heart of this system sit the central banks. They don't just manage debt, they create it. They buy government bonds and in exchange create new money. Every dollar in existence represents some form of debt. There is no money without debt. Every banknote carries an invisible inscription: I owe you. Can this system last forever? The system rests on a single pillar: trust. As long as investors believe governments will keep paying interest, the wheels keep turning. But once that trust falters, chaos follows. In 2010, Greece defaulted on its debt. Bondholders panicked, interest rates skyrocketed, and the IMF had to step in. The result? Years of austerity, high taxes, and mass unemployment. The same story repeated in Argentina and Sri Lanka. When the system collapses, those invisible creditors suddenly take the stage. It's not about repayment, it's about rolling over. Today, governments don't aim to pay off their debts. Yeah, they never really did. The real goal is to roll it over, to take on new debt in order to repay the old. In economics, this process is called refinancing, and the fuel that keeps this engine running is interest. The global economy now runs on this endless loop of debt and interest, like a shark that must keep swimming to stay alive. The U.S. will never fully repay its debt. Japan, with a 250% debt to GDP ratio, has sustained it for decades, and still stands strong. Why? Because investors don't want their money back. They just want to reinvest. Bonds are no longer viewed merely as debt, they've become collateral, the safest assets in the financial world. Ironically, if a country were to pay off all its debt, it could actually collapse the system, because money itself is in large part created from debt. Debt is the heartbeat of the system. That's why when politicians promise to eliminate the national debt, it sounds appealing, but it's unrealistic. The real goal isn't to end debt, but to keep it sustainable. The entire system is built on trust, and if that trust collapses, so does the game. The truth is, the plan was never to repay the debt. The plan was to maintain the belief that it will always be repaid. This is a loop of confidence, and as long as trust continues, the numbers can grow infinitely. But this loop isn't fair to everyone. Interest payments don't flow from the rich to the poor. They flow from the poor to the rich. Debt isn't really about countries, it's about class. A transfer of wealth from the many to the few. That's why debt and inequality always grow hand in hand. The bottom line: creditors aren't villains and debtors aren't victims. But the system only survives as long as both sides believe it will. And when that belief finally breaks, it won't be the numbers that matter. It'll be reality. Because in the end, debt is nothing more than a promise that can't be kept forever.